Okay, we are joined by Nancy Whittemore, Director of Metro General Services. Nancy will also be joining us for the Farmers Market presentation, but at this time we will focus solely on general services and fleet management. Nancy, if you would introduce whoever you might have brought with you and begin your budget presentation to the committee.
Okay, thank you. With me today is Diana Atwood, who is our financial manager for the department. I do have some brief comments I wanted to make before getting into the budget discussion. I think some of these capital projects you've already heard about from other departments, but wanted to run through some of the ones that we have completed since my last time here. Clifford Allen building was completed in August 2011. This was a total renovation of that building. It currently houses Metro Action Commission and Social Services. The Goodlettsville Library was completed in July 2011. The Fire Station 35 on Hobson Lane was completed in September 2011. This was the first fire station that we addressed the new law around the bunks in there, that they have to be separate. So and it is a LEED Silver facility. The West Police Precinct was completed in December of 2011. We also have several construction projects that are underway. The fire stations, which is Fire Station 31 in Madison. I don't know if you all know that this particular station will be a two-story fire station, the first that we've built. Also, the one in East Nashville, Fire Station 3, will also be a two-story. 31 will be completed. We're projecting August 2012, and Fire Station 3 in September 2012. Fire Station 33, which is off of Murfreesboro Road, we have completed the foundation there, and the walls are going up. We anticipate moving those folks back in spring of 2013. Fire Station 21, which is off of Nolensville Road, we are doing the demolition there and abatement, and anticipate relocating those folks back in the summer of 2013. We also have the next fire station that will be breaking ground is Jolton. We've already done the staging for that particular one and hope to start construction work later this summer. Metro Madison, which is the Myatt Drive property, we have the Madison Police Precinct in temporary working quarters there while we're completing the construction of the new precinct and the DNA lab. We're in the final stages of the design of those two areas, and we anticipate those to be completed in the fall of 2013. For Douglas Head Start, you will recall that was a facility that during the flood was underwater. We have now selected an architect and are in the design phase and look forward to getting children back at this location. The purchase of the property for the Midtown Hills Police Precinct has been completed, and Metro just recently took possession of that property. We'll soon start the demolition and the containment on the property, and hopefully that will go smoothly this summer so we can start construction. Southeast Davidson Public Library and Regional Community Center is in the programming stage. We've already had community meetings in April and May of this year, and we anticipate having the RFP on the street for construction in July. The Bellevue Library is also in the programming phases. Public meetings were held for this particular library in April, and we also anticipate having RFP on the street for construction in July. Moving on to our radio communication area, we're in the final stages of implementing a comprehensive 800 megahertz public radio system upgrade to P25 compliance. This upgrade will enhance interoperability, which is an issue that we continue to work with local, state, and federal agencies. Over the last year, we have added the cities of Mount Juliet and Laverne to our radio system. We are currently exploring the possibility of bringing Vanderbilt Police Department and the Vanderbilt Life Flight onto the system. In the area of fleet, we've established a fleet advisory committee to review and advise on fleet policies and procedures for Metro. The committee is made up of department heads from the Department of Finance, General Services, the Chief of Police, the Sheriff, the Director of Public Works, Director of Parks, the Fire Chief, Director of Water Services, and Director of Codes. Scott Potter, who is here today, serves as the chair of this committee, and we appreciate him stepping up to the plate and taking that role on. We also appreciate the work that the advisory committee has done so far. One of the things that we've been able to accomplish since we started this committee, we now have a weekend shift and a night shift that works Monday through Friday at the, we have a weekend shift and a night shift that works Monday through Friday at the heavy garage. For those of you who may not know what that is where we do work. That is our garage that services equipment that's over a ton, which includes fire trucks, ambulances, garbage trucks, those kinds of things. This will give us an opportunity to work on equipment when the equipment is not being used, and will also increase our equipment availability. If you go to, just moving on to our proposed budget is pretty straightforward this year. If you look at page D55 in the budget book, you'll see that all of our business units are being reduced, and most of those are being reduced by 2%. We'll be eliminating one FTE, and we've requested improvements in the area of fuel and utilities. That concludes my remarks, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Councilman Tigard, you're recognized.
Thank you. Nancy or Diana, if you all would help me on D58 in your expenses, there's some pretty up and down, ebb and flow changes. What creates, which I don't see in many other departments, what creates such up and down in some of these, categories? Just other expenses 2 years ago, 10,000 or 10 million budget, came in at 24, back down to 11, up to 13. You can go across any line and you see wide changes in that.
On the other expenses, where you see the actuals, which is your 24 million, that includes depreciation, and that's $12 million. We don't budget for depreciation, so it's always higher than what our budget is.
So the 2012 and 13 budgets don't include depreciation?
No, they don't.
Let me shift to the finance director and ask why.
Is that a number that's done after, is the depreciation number calculated after with a CAFR? Does it come in after the number, or why isn't it done?
It's a monthly charge.
I'll have to check. I don't know the answer for you, sir.
Okay. I mean, it makes it difficult to see any trend in departments. Repairs and maintenance service in 11 budgeted for 8.1 million, came in at 3.9. 2012 budgeted at 8. 2013 down by 4.3 million. Just wild swings. And
We also have a grant that we had that was budgeted in fiscal year 11 and 12, and it's 4.7 million that's coming out.
I see that down in the revenue side, right?
Right. 4 million of that was coming out of the repairs and maintenance in fiscal year 13.
And what was that? Who did that grant come from, and what was it for?
The ARA grant.
The what?
The ARA grant.
Speak in English.
That's a DOE that was a stimulus grant that we've used with the libraries in doing energy upgrades in several of the libraries. We also completed some part of the bikeway, and we did some things with Public Works around traffic lighting and those kinds of things, but it was part of the stimulus.
Okay. Well, you just see my point there. Does Metro have, or do you have a construction manager or an expertise person that you talked about these construction projects and I know the contractor has a project manager and whatnot, but who oversees Metro's interest as these buildings get done?
We have a staff, it's called Construction and Design, that is now in General Services. Diana Stevens is the person who is over that staff. We have project managers that as we do construction projects that are involved in looking at the contractor and what's going on, reviewing, those activities. Occasionally, we have to go out and contract because our staff is not that large, and we will access project managers through contracts too.
Okay. I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but maybe go back a year or two and the projects you described that had come online. Could we get a brief recap of those at some point in the next week or so?
Sure.
Of what the budget was, what they actually came in, and were there any significant changes? If so, what those changes represented?
We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for being here. Quick question, how much of your budget has gone into like rec and abuse of fleet, and has that gone up significantly in the last year or so?
I won't be able to tell you the percentage, but I can get that information for you. Of course, recs are things that we can't control, and every time you turn on the TV, a lot of times that's what you see in the mornings when you get up, and we always cringe when we see those, but it is part of our business, and that's things that happen, but I'll be happy to get to you what percent of that, what that's costing us. Depends on, too, how the wreck occurs, whether we can recover insurance money from that, subrogation money or whatever, but we'll be happy to get that information to you.
Sure, and I know things happen, and just curious if it's gone up any over the last couple of years. Is there any plans in the future to outsource any fleet employees? I thought I'd heard that somewhere, but I just want to get that from you. Is there any plans for that? Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Bednay, you're recognized.
I want to say that it's great to work with General Services. You guys have a great staff and very knowledgeable and do great work. I wanted to ask you about lead architecture buildings that we had been building lately, and see if you can give me a sense. I know it hasn't been enough time to get a sense of the savings for the city, but if you can briefly describe to us, why building these buildings is saving money or potentially saving money to the city. I appreciate that.
Okay. One of the things that we did even before LEED was required by any kind of new construction, we took some of those standards and started incorporating that into our business model. And I'm just going to give you an example of something. You all recall the Birch building and some of the issues we had with it after that construction was completed. One of the things that we did is we went in and we did a retro commissioning of the building. And since 2008, based on the things that we did after it was turned over to General Services, this was prior to us being responsible for construction and design. We just recently got documentation where we saved 17% in utility cost. We know that by using energy-efficient appliance equipment, mechanicals, we know by having automated lighting systems where we can manage the buildings that we can drive down energy cost.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman Holloman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Whittemore. I just want to follow up on what you just raised, which is that as we've gone to LEED certified silver on all of our new construction, obviously we are saving long-term energy cost, operating costs by doing that. And I know there have been discussions at various times about potential retrofit, particularly of some of our larger facilities. Is that something that you're actively pursuing, and if so, how? If you can just talk a little bit about that.
Yes, as we've done a lot of retrofitting over the years. As we, have to go in and replace mechanicals or anything, we have certain standards that we use in replacing, whether it's a flush valve or lighting system or a mechanical system. So that's just part of our business practice that we have built into our business model, and that's one of the ways we've been able to keep our per square foot rate so low. It's about $4.67 right now per square foot.
Have you considered, though, on some of your very large facilities, things such as the arena, that we actually do an audit and maybe consider whether or not, instead of just as we replace things that need replacing, that we actually go in and do some more comprehensive retrofitting of some of those facilities?
Well, we don't manage the arena.
I know the arenas, I know you don't,
yeah.
but...
But, in any facility like that, you would absolutely want to go in and look at the cost benefit of doing something like that, looking at energy savings, what your payback would be, and it would be worthwhile to, have some kind of, data that would support doing that kind of a project.
But that's not currently something that I
That's
guess you have the
not something
resources to do?
Well, we don't manage that particular facility.
I
In
realize
other-
after I use that's the Sports Authority, but some of the other larger facilities that you manage, particularly some of the city office space, whether it makes sense to pursue. I'm just wondering does it over time make sense to have a long-term plan to retrofit some of these proactively, maybe even before some of the lifespan of the electronics or HVACs or those things actually expire, that we could save the cost of doing those projects if we went ahead and undertook them? And have you considered that, and if so, is it a resource issue or what?
Well, that is part of our business model. We do predictive maintenance, and we track the life cycle of a system, and we track maintenance costs on a system. If it starts creating more maintenance dollars than then it's the worth of it, then we would replace that. But that is part of our business model, and we have done that, and we continue to do that in the facilities that we manage.
Okay, thank you.
Council Lady Evans, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman McGuire, and thank you, Ms. Whittemore, for being here, and the work that you do. Whenever I go into a Metro building, it is clean, it is well maintained, it is government, doing really good work. So I know a lot of that is you behind the scenes and at night. So thank you. I really appreciate it. We were having a discussion last night here in the back of the room about maintenance and maintaining buildings in the context with schools. But I'd asked you for some information a few weeks ago, and you identified that you had about 6 maintenance employees who manage about 3.5 million square feet. Is my recollection correct there?
Well, we do have that number of employees, and we as a department manage around 4 million square feet of facilities and properties. But those people aren't responsible for the whole 4 million. We actually go out and reach out to contractors when we need a plumber or electrician or any kind of specialty work. In the past, we had painters and those positions on staff, and if you're not using them, then it's really a waste of a dollar sitting there and not using them to their full skill set or potential. So that's one of the reasons that we went to contracts for that purpose.
And are you satisfied that your contractors are responsive when you have an emergency, the sewer's backing up into a building or whatever? They're responsive, they get there on time, they do what needs to be done?
We are very fortunate to have the contractors that we work with. We now manage those contractors in a way where they understand our response time and what's expected of them. So we feel very fortunate to be working with the contractors we have and the way they respond. Without that, when I think about the flood and some of the things that we needed during that time, if we had just depended upon our staff, of course, we wouldn't have had that level of response. So it was nice to have those contractors in place so that we could reach out to them.
And when you switched from having painters, electricians, carpenters, et cetera, on staff as Metro employees, did you save some money when you switched to a contract thing, or was it about the same, or?
Well, our square foot rate has, over the years, has gone down, and we think it's because of, the energy efficiencies we're talking about, the way we manage buildings, and also how we manage our contractors and our resources.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it.
And Councilman Tiger, you're recognized again.
All right, I want to go back to Councilman Holloman's line of questioning about audit. Mrs. Waller will volunteer her time on the audit of this building, for example. Because we've talked, and we talk every year, that you can stand in front of those windows or the window in front of her office in the wintertime and feel the cold air. And I've been told, but I'm sure she's not one of the culprits, that we have many employees that have to have heaters in their office because of those conditions. So what Jason was talking about, is this the type building that needs to have an audit to see if we're wasting money through in these windows and other holes?
You're right, Councilman. We have this discussion every year about the windows here. We have done thermal imaging on this building. We know that there is loss of heat and cooling, through the windows. We've talked about why that's happened because of the historical nature of the windows, and that the storm windows were not put back on at time of the construction. We have done some, I know in Rich's office, we've been working in his office.
Selective
No, I
repairs?
think we've started on the lower floor. But we have been doing some things with the windows. We did a study and we looked at the payback if we replaced all the windows in this building and what the payback would be, and it was very low when you look at the amount of money it would cost to replace them and then the energy savings. But it's something that is on our radar. We're doing things as we can in this building, but we'd be happy to replace all the windows if we could get the capital money to do that.
Well, I just, there's a social cost when you've got employees that are uncomfortable and can't do their job without bringing in what might be considered inappropriate equipment, heating or air, just to be able to survive at their own desks. So, that's something, I'd like to see those costs, because if we're having trouble, we don't seem to be having trouble for a lot of other capital costs if we can, I'm not going to go any further there. All right, final question. The gymnasium for selected employees at Howard School Building. We have a state-of-the-art fitness center located in such a location that only a select few employees can get to. Are you satisfied that we as a government did a good job on either the placement of that gym or what went wrong where we have the capacity to allow more employees in there, but because of security and other concerns, it can't be used?
That particular fitness center is available to over 700 employees on that campus. It has 20-some-odd pieces of equipment in it. Should it be open to all Metro employees? My opinion is no, because we don't have the capacity, to open it to all Metro employees. Would all Metro employees want to use it? Probably not. But we do have some security issues in the building that also restricts and I know you've had conversations with people who, in the building where security is a high priority for ITS and others. Whether it should have been behind a card reader, that could be debated, but it is for 700 employees. It's there to promote a healthy workplace for employees that are on that campus. We have fitness centers in other Metro buildings like police precincts, fire halls. We also have community centers throughout the county that employees can go to with parks. It was never intended in the design of that or as we thought through that, to be available to all Metro employees. It was intended to be for the employees that were on that campus.
And I understand based on the footage, but when you have 15 or 20 pieces of equipment and you've provided me the scanned usage of that facility, and I've yet to find a day that over 35 people used it, and you do the math on the number of pieces of equipment versus the cost of that equipment versus the availability, and then when you tell me that of course, I'm not the type that would use it, but Councilman Pardue would love to go over there and pump some iron and and use it, and you tell me that that unless you work on that campus, you can't use it. That just does not make sense, and that, as a taxpayer, I'm almost offended that we can't figure out a way to let more people use it and get it up to capacity.
What does make sense to me is that if we prevent one person from going to the hospital and we save that healthcare cost, then we have, then that would pay for the equipment that we have in there. We have people who are in cardiac rehab who are using the facility. We have people who've lost, 30, 40, 50 pounds by using that facility. So I think if you look at it from a healthcare cost and benefit cost, it would serve its, it is a cost benefit that would be good stewards of taxpayers' money.
Councilman Pardue, you're recognized.
Yes, ma'am, just one or two questions. I know you don't have an ashtray in there. Believe me, I know you don't. But my question is, if we can spend that kind of money, I don't know what the gymnasium cost, but I'm sure it was expensive. Yet you got other employees that don't agree with your lifestyle, that, like myself, I'm a smoker. Don't want to be, but I am. But you've got employees out there that I've got letters at home from that are literally being mistreated because they don't agree with what you do, what you want to do. They don't want to, maybe not want to use the exercise equipment, but on their break, if they're like me and want to smoke a cigarette, they got to walk a block and a half. Now you've got little outside lunch tables or resting areas, whatever you want to call them, for people that absolutely beautiful with shade trees, little flowers, and all that stuff. But the smokers, when they do get to their destination to smoke a cigarette, there's not even a tree in sight of that place. I asked you one time about letting them smoke in that garage, and my answer was, we can't do that because there's a possibility that the cigarette smoke will set off the sprinkler system. And that's an impossibility. That won't happen. If it does, I'll buy you a new garage. But that don't run on smoke. It runs on heat. If you could just explain why you can spend enough money for that gymnasium, why you can't do something for those folks to get them out of the rain.
If you look at that campus, the majority of the people on there, I think, are not smokers, and one of the things that we're trying to promote on this campus is a healthy workplace. When you look at having LEED facilities, they're looking at the infiltration of smoke, the air quality into facilities, the smoking where pedestrians walk by. So, we think we've provided an adequate place for smokers. They have, it's in a private area. It's not in the middle where the public's coming in and out. I know it's maybe, like you said, a block and a half to walk, if that far. I don't know if it's that far. But we feel like it is, a lot of campuses are going to smoke-free campuses, but we have provided smokers a place to smoke, and we think that's satisfactory.
Sorry, Councilman.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
How much distance does one need before the cigarette smoke bothers you? I mean, where do I have to stand to smoke a cigarette where it wouldn't bother you? How far away do I need to be?
I don't know the answer to that question. It depends on if the wind's blowing that day. There's a lot of, factors that would.
So there are days when the wind's blowing in that direction where they can smoke just outside the door.
Well, there's a state law that talks about infiltration into the building. So that is state law. The health department is the agency that manages that. But we feel like that, again, what we provided for smokers is adequate.
Well, it's just strange that you can spend that kind of money for the gymnasium for one class of people, and the other class gets to stand in the sun. Thank you.
Thank Councilman. I don't have any other members in my queue at this time. So Nancy, thank you so much. I know that if
Thank you.
you could capture all of the hot air that's created in this chamber, you could probably heat this building for months. So if you can. I'm just making sure everybody's awake after all the hours of public hearings. But thank you so much. We will see you again shortly for Farmers Market.
We're here, we're ready whenever you are.
We are, yeah. By shortly, I meant right now. Okay, a little bit of a change, but we wanted to move up Farmers Market since Nancy is also interim director of that. So Nancy, if you would, please begin your budget presentation on the Farmers Market.
Okay, thank you. With me today is Tana Comer, who's the Farmers Market Board Chair. We had anticipated some of the other board staff members to be here this afternoon, but I think because of the time change, they probably could not make it. But I just wanted to recognize them: Kay West, Josh Smith, Joycelyn Stevenson, and Margot McCormick. All of them have worked really hard with us over the last few weeks and have, we really appreciate their support. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Farmers Market staff. This transition, they've had to, they've been very patient, very understanding, and very cooperative. Just so you know why I am in this seat tonight, on May the 24th, the Farmers Market Board entered into a 120-day memorandum of understanding with General Services. Under this agreement, General Services is providing administrative and building operation services. We've also agreed to address the findings and recommendation in the recent special review conducted by the Department of Finance. And I want to go over just a few of the findings that were found as part of that review that we're addressing. Inconsistencies in lease content and management, no cost allocation plan to track, monitor, and allocate operational cost to the merchants. Current allocated cost charges per square foot are inadequate to cover cost. There was inadequate segregation of duties. They were accepting cash payments, and there was insufficient remittance deadlines. Operational and financial management deficiencies in the areas of special events and the demonstration kitchen, non-compliance with Metro Civil Service regulation and payroll procedures, discrepancies in the area of direct bill for utilities, and management deficiencies regarding the shed rental space. Several of these findings we have already started to address. We've implemented a policy for no cash. We're complying with civil service regulations and payroll procedures. We're developing procedures for special events. One of the priorities at this time is meeting with merchants on lease issues and working with legal on developing a standard lease document. There's issues around revenue, how we can generate more revenue, what is the direction of the farmers market, what will that look like. So there's lots of things that need to be addressed, and we will be doing that and we'll talk a little more about what the board has planned. But I just want to say, even with the financial issues that I just talked about, there are many, many positive things that are going on at Farmers Market. If you go down there, you see lots of activity, you see lots of people there on the weekend and during the week. Just a few things that's happened over the last year. There's been 4 new restaurants: the AM at FM, the Louisiana Seafood Company, the Green Asia Chinese Cuisine, the Butter Buttercake Coffee Cafe, and most recently, Bella's Nashville Gourmet Pizza. The Grow Local Kitchen opened in December 2011 and has hosted over 45 classes, demonstrations, and caterings, as well as incubating a new local pop-up restaurant called the Speckled Hen. This restaurant was recently recognized in the Nashville scene. There were over 60 events that had been held, and several in partnerships with local community organizations. One of the most popular events that the market has is the night market, and the next one is scheduled for June the 15th. The market has received recognition in several publications, and just to name a few, Forbes magazine Travel rated the market as one of the top 10. Details magazines rated the night market as one of the top 5. The New York Times noted the night market. Rachel Ray magazine noted the night market. Visa Black Card magazine has just rated us as a top 10 farmers market and is doing a special edition on the night market. So there's lots of things going on there, and one of the things that we're focusing on is how we can make the market self-sufficient. If you look at the budget, the thing that stands out to me is the increase in the subsidy from $89,900 to $316,900, which is a difference of around $227,000. The development of a revenue strategy and then managing that strategy is critical to the market becoming self-sufficient. In my discussions with the board, they are all very committed to addressing these issues, and they're planning to do a strategic plan session within the next month, mapping out the direction. Our goal is, by the end of August is when the 120-day memorandum of understanding will be up for general services, but we hope in coordination with the market that we can go forward with a recommendation to the mayor on what the direction should be and how we either bring it within budget or we have to look at other revenues that we can do. I believe, just in my short time there, that there are things that we can do, bringing in for events, for festivals. So I think there is a way to increase the revenues. It's just we've got to get a plan together and make it happen. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilman Tigard, you're recognized.
Thank you. My first request, Mr. Chair, would be from either Mike or John or Rich, if we could get a 10-year spreadsheet on the revenues and expenditures of the market to show trends of sort of a historical background without subsidies, just basically a profit and loss statement over 5 to 10 years would be very helpful. I saw your assistant talking about one of the options that needed to be considered was privatization of the market, which I was quite frankly, personally thrilled to hear that discussion as to whether that was an option. Whose choice is that option?
Well, I think it's something that the board will want to look at as they go through. In that particular interview, and I think what she was saying when they were talking about privatization is that she thought that it would be something that the board would consider all options. Rich, you want to speak to whose decision that would be?
Well, I think the first place would be the board. I mean, I think the board would have to decide if that's something they're looking at and would recommend to go to explore that. And we've not had that discussion in depth with them. And as they start looking at their strategic vision, I expect that's something they'll consider. But I mean, I think the structure of this is that the board oversees the operation of the market and is responsible for it. So it's like the way the government's set up with the, somewhat independent boards and commissions, that they would have would be the first step. And I guess obviously if the council wasn't pleased with that action, they could decide not to fund it. But, obviously hoping don't get to that any kind of, acrimonious basis.
Well, that was basically my question, because ultimately, if any decision is made, good or bad, this body here and working with your department has to fund any deficit.
Right.
So.
Right. No, that's right. And I think, obviously, but I think that, what we're saying, but Nancy and I think what the board's saying is that they recognize the issues. They've identified the problems that we've, the finance report put out. And, I think they're asking for a little period of time to try to get things turned around and come up with a strategic plan for it, which would reduce or hopefully get to a basis where it's self-sufficient. I think that, two major factors that you have to look at on this. One is that there's a lease payment to the state for the property, which expires in 2015. And once that goes away, because then it's the city's property when there's no longer a lease payment, that's about $250,000 right there, which obviously then goes to the bottom, helps the bottom line. So that's an important step of it. And then also some of the losses are reflected in depreciation, which is not really, it's not a paid loss, but it's.
But that depreciation
right.
represents an investment.
No, that's right. No, I'm not under his, but it's not a dollar loss, but it's actual, on a P&L it wouldn't show up that way. And so, I've been pleased that by the board's willingness to look at other ideas, and I think they understand that there's been some issues there that need to be addressed. I think that General Services, Nancy and her people have gone there and cleaned it up a little bit and starting the effort to talk to the vendors on a more regular basis. I mean, the board is the board, with all due respect, they meet once a month, and it's kind of hard to day-to-day manage an operation, and so that's why I thought it was important to get General Services down there to get some consistency.
You had to stop
Yeah,
the bleeding
right.
somewhere, and General
so,
Services was as good a place.
I mean, I'm on a personal basis, I'm not opposed to ultimately maybe privatization is the right answer for that, but I don't know that yet, and that's what I think we just need to explore and see what we think we can do without going that route.
Is it possible legally to issue an RFP for prospective bidders with the understanding that the board and/or this body has the option to reject any bid?
Well, any contract Metro, any procurement Metro does, we always maintain the right to not enter into that, engage in that, and do that. I think it's a little premature to even go down that road. Again, I'm not opposed to going down that road, because I think right now, I think we need to figure out what the problems have been and get it fixed, so we know where we are, and then I think we can decide whether it's something we think we're better served to do ourselves, or whether we're open to doing this a private effort.
The other side of me would say, though, you issue this RFP and you get bids, and some entrepreneur / organic / marketing whiz / Apple technology, whatever, that has a tremendous idea out there that says, I want to pay you X number of thousands, hundreds, thousands, whatever it might be, to use this facility because I can make it this, and this. Without soliciting those ideas to see, the boards I sit on, a lot of times we know our limitations, the 10 of us sitting across the table, and we might have a great idea, but ultimately by throwing this out to the entire community, sometimes you do visioning sessions and other things, but a lot of times you just throw this out there, and somebody with a great idea pops up, and you say, we can't afford not to do this.
I understand what Tana, you want to?
I did want to address that. We are hoping to have community input with this as the strategic plan progresses around. We also want to talk with the vendors on both sides, the farmers, the restaurants, as well as the flea market vendors, to get everybody's input. We realize what a challenge this is to the board. We realize what we have to do with the strategic planning and the ideas that we hope to come up with. And it is a huge thing, and we're dedicated to doing it, and so we are open to any and all suggestions, and that's what we're really depending on, is somebody to come up with something to help us through this and to work with us on it.
Councilman Davis, you're recognized.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. First, I'd just say, pay compliment to the farmers market in general. I think it's wonderful. I think a lot of the renovations you guys have done have been great. I would argue maybe it's a little too early to privatize as well. I just get the sense that we've had one bad apple in there or something, and just things have gone wrong, because it seemed like we weren't having all these issues before. So, I would support what we're doing to get it right this year. I would say, don't come back to us next year for that kind of subsidy. Let's get it right. Let's get our fiscal house in order. But what can you do with the leases of the renters? When are you going to be able to change those? To me, it seemed like we were actually making money when we had, just the one bad Chinese place in there or something, and then now we have a lot of fancy schmancy places, and we're not doing as well. So, I think it's just simple business here. What are we doing when are we going to be able to get the rents in the right place? I think it's just a simple revenues expenses thing going on here. Obviously, you've signed certain things with them. When are you going to be able to adjust those rents?
Well, that's one of the things that we've been there for 3 weeks, and so that's one of the things on the top of our priority list is looking at leases. They're across the board right now. There's inconsistencies, there's exclusions in it. Everybody, people are charged differently, so it's coming up with a square foot rate, what you get for that square foot rate. There's coolers that are being rented out. There's storage space that's been rented out. And, some of that we're charging for, some we're not. The electrical, the utilities that are used on the property, some are paying for that, some aren't. So it's really all across the board. So what we've been focusing on for the last couple of weeks is understanding what are the leases, what are the provisions of the leases, what are people paying, it's really inconsistent. So we're working with legal. We also talked with Rich this morning about we need somebody to come in and to help us benchmark what that would look like, the fees would look like for that space. We've got 3 different lines of businesses going on at the farmers market. You've got the farm shed, which the board really wants local farmers in the farm shed. Then you've got the market house, which are your restaurants. And I know, people are looking for healthy options. How would that support the whole overall message about farmers market? And then you have what's called currently the flea market. And I know that there have been, I think there were some issues with, knockoff people selling knockoff purses and whatever there, and so that's been cleaned up, and there's been some revenue loss because of that. But what is the vision of the board and the community, and what kinds of things could we have in those sheds, whether it's artisan, festivals, what would draw the community and others in there on a regular basis, and what would draw merchants in there who want to be there. So we want to make this place be a destination for Nashville, and for people to, I'd love to see the day where we have a waiting list for people who want those spaces. So that's kind of where we are today. Now, whether we can turn it around in a year, we're going to have to come up with a strategy, and then we're going to have to really start working hard to bring revenue in. Events, that's a nice venue for events, and we have some not-for-profits and some corporate, who use that for events, but we weren't charging very much to do it. It was such a steal. So we've got to be competitive, but at the same time, we've got to bring in the revenue and cover our cost.
Yeah, we don't want to give it away. Absolutely. As long as we're running it like a business should be run. Hopefully, we won't be here having that conversation again next year if you guys can get it in order. And it sounds like you're going to give us reports and that sort of thing along the way. We'd like to see your strategic plan once you have that in place. Just because, Charlie's going to be asking the same question next year. And obviously, we have, we can balance a budget here at Metro. We can take revenues and have expenses and not have things that are losing money left and right. So let's just get it straight. It sounds like we had a bad apple, but we want to see that it's better next year.
Yeah, right now it's some very basic business practices that we need to get in place. So we've got to start at that level and then build up.
Councilman Holloman, you're recognized.
Just one quick follow-up. I understand there's going to be these recommendations that come out, which may include discussion for privatization, as Councilman Tigard mentioned. Can you talk briefly about how that fits with the search for a new director of the farmers market? Because it does occur to me, if privatization is a serious option, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to go through the search process, hire somebody to fill that position that would then very quickly be eliminated. Is that part of the analysis?
Well, I will respond, then I'll let Tana respond. Right now, have salaries. We've got 2 people who are retiring, so we've got that liability that we need to, take into account over the next few months so that we, from a budgetary standpoint, we can manage that. But the board is currently working with the mayor's office and HR on coming up with a job description for a search for a new market director. The board plans to do their strategic direction and that work before they actually go out for that, start that process. So I would think that once the board makes some decisions, then a decision will be made on, whether to go forward looking for that person, or if they're going to go the privatization route, we'd have that decision made.
Okay, just so I understand, so you actually think that the report with the recommendations will come out prior to that search getting very far down the road? Is that?
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay.
The timing of it is, we have voted on a job description that we are accepting, and I have contacted the Department of Human Resources to run it past them. So it is just a time, how long will it take? How long will the job opening be? How long will the interviewing process take place? I'm not sure if I could say one way or the other which will come first. But privatization is just one option of many, many options
I
the
understand.
board's looking at.
And I'm not suggesting that I think that's the best option. I just do think that if it is something that we're seriously considering, it's important to also consider the timeline for a replacement for the director.
Council Lady Gilmore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I want to say, do we know how many people come through the farmers market? Do you have a kind of an idea?
A census, you mean on, I don't, with me,
It's definitely a seasonal thing, and I don't think anybody's ever kept track throughout the summer months or throughout the winter months to have a really good feel of that number.
Okay. I want to say, I think it really is a unique place, so I hope that we do continue to work with it. I do think you guys are on the right track. I just wanted to mention, though, some of the flea market vendors have expressed before, really a lot to me about the fair pricing and just the heat being fixed. The heat doesn't work outside for the flea market side, and that they have brought it to the attention several times. But I think Jeff did some really good things, which was community outreach, bringing in the new programs, the Friday market. But I just wanted to say, please look into that. I think that that's important. And also they expressed that there was never advertising for the outside part of the flea market, but it would be for the inside part.
We did listen to them, and the marketing director, if you'll have any emails, and mainly that's what we do, a lot of emails and a lot of marketing through the internet, the flea market is always mentioned now. They always have a special spot, and if they have something special going on in the market, it's mentioned in that as well. And our social media is really, really going well at the time. We have over 1,000 people involved in it, so it's going really well.
Okay, good deal. I just know that a lot of them had expressed that concern. And what about the heat? Do you think the heat will be fixed? Because it wasn't fixed, especially when they're out there during the winter time. It's not working.
we are doing an assessment of the property and all the things that need to be addressed, and we'll prioritize those depending upon the money that we have. I don't know how efficient it is to have heat in an outside shed going like that. So there may be other options. So we'll look at that and address it though.
I just know however you can make it work, because it is really cold in the wintertime, and they are out there, and they feel like they paid a fee, and originally it was placed there to work, and I just know that is a concern that they shared, and they just want to make sure that they're being treated fairly with dignity, which it looks like you guys are on to the right. You're going in the right directions in terms of pricing and consistency. I think those are the biggest things shared, so I just kind of wanted to share those as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bednay, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. So a client of mine wanted to open a restaurant at the market years ago, and it took like an exorbitant amount of time for him to be able to open it. And we've been talking to Matt Wilshire and the city, and Codes has come a long way to make life easier for people that want to do things in Nashville. I wonder, I guess I wanted to suggest that you look also, when you're looking at the business plan for the farmers market, that you also look at expediting and making life easier for people that want to open a restaurant or any facility in the market.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other members in my queue, Nancy, thank you so much for working double duty today.